Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Burn. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined by a great candidate, a fierce and fiery progressive from the great state of Florida, Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick. How you doing, Sheila?
I'm good.
Um,
Thank you
I'm,
for
I'm,
having me.
Thanks for taking some time to chat with me about your race. I'm proud right off the bat. I think I got your name right. It's a bit of a mouthful.
It's actually Cherfilus-McCormick,
I
but
didn't.
I let people slide. It's been like
Okay.
that. Yeah, it's my maiden name. So all my life I've heard It's okay.
All right. Well, apologies. I'll get it right next time once you're in office. So you're running against a Democratic incumbent in Florida's 20th district, and I do want to highlight the district and some of the issues pertinent to the constituency there, and how the incumbent has sort of let them down, and he certainly has a dodgy record. We'll get into that as well. But a little bit about you, like what's your background and what inspired you to run?
Well, I'm a mom, lawyer, and healthcare executive, and I'm a wife also. And I really was inspired because of all the hardships that I was going through. A lot of the times when I tell people what I do, they always think they assume that it was like easy sailing or something that just happened overnight. But actually, it was long. And I was a single mom for 12 years. And I was a single mom, and I was doing my MBA. I was going to law school, trying to raise my daughter. And in the midst of all that, I found out she had a learning disability. So now I was trying to juggle going to school, raising my daughter with a learning disability, and trying to get the resources we needed to kind of help her flourish. So me and the teachers were always like trying to figure out how we can help her, get her tested, just doing so many things. And it wasn't until I actually started working in my career that I was able to, pay and try and get resources. And I ended up taking some time off to look for resources. And at that moment, I did start figuring out how I can help her, but it was tied to money. If I didn't have that money to do it, she wouldn't have got the resources. At the time, I suffered silently for years. And it wasn't until one day I was talking to one of my friends, and she was telling me about her daughter who's autistic and how hard it is to get the resources for her daughter. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was there too. And so at that time, I was so ashamed, thinking that somehow I failed. And, you're trying to get everything done. But then I realized, no, that it really was our health system, our healthcare system that was doing this. Along with that, my father-in-law was diagnosed with cancer around 2017. And so was my father at the same time. My father-in-law was a vet. He was very proud. He served in Vietnam, and he was also a deacon at a church, just loved people. And my dad was a doctor. And my father-in-law died 6 months later because he couldn't get, his treatment. He was just doing a little bit of chemo. And my father actually was able to use his entire savings to get into an experimental program, and he's still alive today, but he had to literally drain his bank account. And that was another indication to me that, in the United States right now, if who money really does determine who lives and who dies, and that's an unjust system. And we're watching it living. And so something in me just kind of clicked, and I said, I need to do something. I'm equipped to go and start, talking to people in Congress. I was equipped to lobby. And so that's what I did immediately. I started lobbying and saying our community needs change. And that's what got me here. And every day when I'm out there fighting about healthcare, economic development, just making sure that we're actually being paid attention to, I realized that it wasn't just me from the beginning. The struggle wasn't just me. The debt that I was under with my education, trying to find opportunity, the pay inequality, it's something that we all have been suffering silently about. And I just couldn't let it happen any longer. So I've been fighting against this for almost 10 years now. But now it's time for us to take it up a notch, because I realize our congressman isn't doing anything.
Right on. And you ran in 2018, and you're running again this time around. What lessons did you learn in 2018 that you're applying this time around?
Well, in 2018, I decided to run really at the end of the race, actually at the end of the filing period. It was actually, I was coming back from DC, and I went to go talk to my congressman. I went to go talk to everybody and kind of tell them what we need. And at that time, we were talking about a living wage, making sure that a lot of our nurses, HHAs in healthcare are getting paid decently, and they're getting paid directly from Medicaid. So this is something that they can really take care of. And it was falling on deaf ears. He was not listening. There was just no concern. So I was so angry that I flew back and I said, I'm going to run. And I told my husband, I'm running. And he's like, okay. And so the next morning I woke up, got myself together, And I drove from Fort Lauderdale to Tallahassee, which was around like 8 hours, like a crazy one. I'm driving there with my sister, and we filed. So we had 3 months to put on a campaign, and I didn't know anything about campaigning. Didn't have a campaign manager, and so we did it in 3 months. We only raised like $30,000, which is nothing when you're going against an incumbent who had 800,000 at that time. And we were able to get close to 30% of the votes, which
Wow.
was never done at that time. Especially they said I was a nobody. You're a nobody. But what they didn't realize is that I'm a mom. I'm a mom living in the district, raising children. I lived in the district. I grew up in the district. I went to high school in the district. So for political people to look at a working person like myself and say I'm a nobody, how do I think I'm going to win an election? That just tells you the mentality. But what they didn't represent is that I'm everyone in the community. And so we've just been leveraging that. And that really showed people that it's our time. If you're going to be about the people, if you're going to be in the position that's for the people, you need to start representing the people and our urgent needs.
Right
And so
on.
you asked
Yeah.
me what I learned. What I learned this time is to start early, and we've been hitting the pavement. COVID has been a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways. It's a blessing just because immediately I couldn't leave people like that. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, South Florida has been a hotspot twice. We're being hit again now. And so I have a background in healthcare, and I said, I can help. I have access to masks and gloves and other devices. So I just started passing them out. We did drive-throughs to give people masks. You remember in the beginning, they were like, oh, wear a mask covering. And everybody's like, what? Like, what? Where do I get it? Do I make it? So we were the first ones out there. We saw a lot of families also were just devastated because they were losing jobs like overnight. No one prepared. So we said, okay, let's partner with some of the local businesses that were losing money and just buy food in bulk and give it out after church or after events. So we're giving out hot plates, on Sunday, just to encourage that familiar feel, like that, Sunday dinner.
Yeah.
And so we were out there and we met so many people in the community, and I got to see really what was going on. And it circled right back to what made me want to run. I met a lot of people who lost their jobs, and they said, you know what, I'm on my last vial of insulin. How can I get some insulin? I just lost my job, lost my insurance. And I was like, here we are again. This healthcare situation in our country is terrible. And it just rejuvenated me. And every day when we get out there and we're running and we're fighting, we have the people on our back, like we're here. And so that's what I learned. You just keep fighting for the people and keep leveraging it.
Right on. Yeah, there's so much in there that you said that's amazing, right? So you mentioned about being a single mom and struggling through college, and there's shame in that, right? But it's completely it's bullshit. Like, we should not feel shame for that, right? Like, but everyone feels that, and that never gets discussed because it's kind of individualized. But it's a universe. That struggle is universal, so there should not be shame. So I'm glad that you raised that point, and the thing you said about being a nobody, use the word nobody, that just, they want to dissuade, sort of regular people from running to, continue the stratification, right, of the classes, right? So, yeah, I'm glad that you said that too. And I'm glad that that was certainly not a deterrent for you. So,
I think it's the narrative, the narrative that they use to, and I say they, and I say that for people who are in politics, who are, the status quo keepers, people who think they're the gatekeepers, they use
right.
that strategy to kind of stop us from getting those positions, to stop
Yeah.
us from taking our places in history. History has always been led by regular people who stood up and said, no, I'm going to change this. So they use this to demean us. And, it's even harder when you're a single mom too, you're like, well, maybe I can't, And so when I heard those words that, oh, she's a nobody running against, it brought me back to that place, where I felt like, well, maybe I can't. But the love of the people and fighting for them shows me every day that I'm somebody. I'm actually the people, and that's why we fight.
Right on. Here, here. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the incumbent. It's Alcee Hastings, and I don't know how aggressive you want to get on this, but he has quite the dodgy record, and I'll just kind of itemize him, and feel free to jump on any you want to jump on. I guess back in the 80s, he had been impeached and removed from the bench. He has a sexual harassment settlement while he was in office. Sort of a financial scandal where he leased a car for personal use and sort of, footed the bill to the taxpayers, right? He has nepotism charges, I suppose. He's been in office for 30 years. I'm assuming he's, I'm assuming he's a bit of a mixed bag. On some issues, he's probably great, but on some issues, he's probably kind of obstructive and a run-of-the-mill corporate Democrat. What do you want to say about him and sort of that laundry list of scandals? Anything?
Yeah, well, it's cumulative, right? We can have a lot of scandal. Every single period's another ethical violation investigation, but it's not just that. It comes to the inactiveness, the unwilling to do something or effectuate change, and continuously sitting in a position where the people are direly need change, direly need certain things. I mean, if you see my district and see what we're in need of, for you to say you're for the people, how can you look at us and watch us just be deprived of existence, deprived of being able to move forward? Our district has a large number of women, even business women like myself, and we're trying to put up our businesses, trying to get contracts, government contracts, trying to get equal pay, and we're close to 60% of the district, but there has never been any kind of proposal. He has never tried to address our needs. Our children, I'm a mother of 2 kids. My daughter is 17, my son is 16. When we look at the suicide rate amongst our children, the number is skyrocketing. I saw amongst minority kids of this year that it went up by 75%. And so when you're living that kind of life, it's like, okay, you can ask us to look past your ethical issues, which we shouldn't, but what they have to really ask ourselves, how could we need to go forward, ignoring us, supporting payday lenders against our interests, taking so much money from payday lenders and not growing the businesses in the community. Just the myriad of corruption that has been present in our district. It really shows how we have been overlooked and slighted for the benefit of corporate donors and for the people who are actually supporting and protecting the incumbent.
Yeah, right on. Let's take a look at the district a little bit, right? Because it's one of those ones that's gerrymandered in a ridiculous way. So it's Florida 20. It's a majority Black district, and it's around Fort Lauderdale and Palm Beach. So it kind of cuts into the city. It's one of those things where it appears like they did gerrymandering in order to select voters, right?
Yes.
It's a solidly D+31 district. What can you tell us, about this gerrymander, about your district that people should know?
Well, it's unfortunate that we have been gerrymandered in this way, because a lot of the people who live in the southern part really aren't similarly situated with the ones who are living above. And the lines have been drawn specifically by color. And we could be honest about it, and you can see it by the number and even by the places that it dips into. If you look at the places where it goes into those are majority minority areas. And it's a shame, because it doesn't allow our issues to be talked about and discussed on a forum where we have multicultural relationships and multicultural people there, lumping us together, assuming that we all have the same issues, even though half of my district, when it comes to the northern side, is agricultural. And then the southern side, it's mostly business. So that's deeply unfortunate. And that's something that I'm looking forward to make sure that we can take care of that. Like I said, the biggest part of it that's unfortunate is that we can't have real discussions. The other areas that we're living right next to each other, we can't discuss about what's happening in our district. And elected officials are allowed to talk about one subject to one group and another subject to another group, not having us come together as a community like we need to, especially in times like this. This is when we need to have the conversations about relationships, race relations, how we going forward as a community in equality and unified. But, our district is drawn by color.
Yeah. Yeah, there's and it's interesting because there's the Everglades on this side, and I'm assuming more urban areas, on the East Coast, right? So there's or the east side of it. So I wonder, as you're campaigning, you support the Green New Deal, right? And there is a clear, intersectionality between environmental justice and racial justice. So how does that resonate in your district? Because it's a real stark example of that.
Yeah, well, we have really big issues when it comes to the areas, Belglade, South Bay, and Pahokee. In that area, we have a lot of big sugar over there. And the way they're going about manufacturing sugar is actually poisoning the people. I mean, in schools over there, they actually have an inhaler and breathing systems because the way they're burning the cane is giving people a lot of complications in their breathing. So we see the direct correlation on how the pollutants is getting towards them. But then even when you move into the areas of Fort Lauderdale, we just had one of the biggest sewage spills in Fort Lauderdale in the district. And it was because there were old pipings that they never took care of. So, we had this huge spill. So that disparity happens all along the district. And we've been demanding change, asking for change. The people of Belgrade and Pahokee have been fighting this big sugar issue for so long. But with the sugar companies donating so much money to the incumbent, he stays silent. And it's heartbreaking to see young people growing up with all these breathing issues and cancer because of what big sugar is doing to the environment.
Right. So that's, yeah. So if you zoom in, you can really see, I mean, this is, and this is entirely drawn based on ethnicity, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's completely, even the Western sign that you're looking at, a lot of it is Everglades. So some people look at it and think, well, these parts are actually touching that part right there. A lot of it is Everglades and people aren't really living in there. And that's where big sugar resides.
Okay. Okay, cool. And I should point out that I have Guido on tomorrow, who is District 21, which is to the east of you, right? So that's, and you've joined forces, I suppose, with him for
Yes.
what do you call the?
Yes, we've joined forces. It's because as you see my district, in between it, we actually have 3 districts that lie in between my district. And so one part of it is right now we have Representative Lois Franco who's there, and she's being challenged by Guido Wise. And then we have Ted Deutsch. There's no one challenging Ted Deutsch. And then we have Jen Perlman, who is challenging Debbie Washman Schultz. And then we have right beneath me, which is in Miami, there's Christine Olivio, who's challenging Frederica Wilson. But all those districts cut into mine. Like I'm connected to every single one. And if you want to know why, it's because we're minorities. That's the only thing that connects us all.
So when you talk to constituents, do they understand? Obviously, they understand the gerrymandering, but they understand, back to the environmental components and is the Green New Deal like an easy sell when you tie it to racial justice?
Yeah, they're starting to understand. The biggest part that we have, the community understands that there is disparity, right? Because if you look at it, the places that aren't my district, those are our neighbors, and they're actually very wealthy areas. So I actually live in Miramar, which is the lower part. Right next to me is Pembroke Pines, which connects to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's area. So if I was to cross the street from my house, I'm looking at Debbie Wasserman Schultz's district, and it's not mine, but those are my neighbors. So, and we see the difference as far as hospitals. The hospitals are in my district versus that district. Schools that are in my district versus the schools there. So when we talk about disparity, job skills training, environment, they understand there's a disparity there. And with the Green New Deal, it does so much for infrastructure and jobs and training, and even equaling, food deserts that we have. That when I start talking to them, they're like, "Oh, is that what it is?" No one ever put it in that perspective for them. So the people want change, and they're signing on to it.
Right on. Since I'm here, I just want to pull up your website because it is thorough, right? So if you go to it's SheilaForCongress.com. If you go to legislative priorities and issues, you certainly spell out what you're fighting for, which is really great, and in direct terms, right? I support the Green New Deal. Boom, right out of the gate, right? Not like I support a transition to a path to the Green New Deal principles, right? You're very direct, which is commendable. So certainly go check out SheilaForCongress.com. You can donate, you can volunteer there. So is there anything, talking about the Green New Deal and the incumbent Alcee Hastings, is there anything that you want to, tie directly to, big sugar, in Florida, that's a big thing. Does he take money from Big Sugar? How has it impacted his vote?
Yeah, he takes a lot of money from Big Sugar, and that's really why there hasn't been anything done. If you look at the regulations that Big Sugar has been able to evade, or the lack of regulations, that's something you have to ask yourself why. With so many people being sick and being affected, why have they been able to successfully evade it? If anything, even get subsidies from the government. There hasn't been any other industry really who's had the pleasure of that. I'm in healthcare, and I remember when I first started going up there and advocating, they were like, "Oh, well, healthcare industry has fraud and abuse." And I'm like, we don't have fraud and abuse. We're just a small company trying to take care of the members in our community. But that was the excuse they kept on presenting. And so when I see companies like Big Sugar who are allowed to, abuse the community by getting them sick and polluting them, even the waterways are being contaminated. It makes me wonder, why aren't they saying, hey, we're going to regulate you. We're going to come out and do regular audits to find out if your practices are safe. And it's down to money. And we need to be very clear about that, because the more money that goes to the congressman is usually during the year when they're thinking about if they're giving subsidies, if they're renewing the farm bill. And that's the year where you see the money flows in to the donations of the congressman. And that's where we have to stand up and stop corruption and be very clear about it. And that's why I spell out everything very clearly on my website, because Americans are tired. We're tired of the double talk. We're tired of the gray. I'm sorry about that. I think my phone keeps going in and out from my internet.
No, it's good. I can hear you, but not see you at the moment.
Okay. I think it's my internet that keeps on. I don't know what that is. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. As long as I can hear you, maybe it'll come back on. Um, so let me ask about just the urge for change, right? So with a 30-year incumbency, you know, um, are people in the district tired of no change? In fact, obstruction. What's the sense that you get when you talk to constituents about that?
Everybody says it's time. That's the
Yeah.
biggest thing that I hear from everyone, that it is time. Especially right now, the congressman has missed several votes. The congressman has even given his voting right to Debbie Wasserman Schultz as his proxy. And at the time when we need someone who can actually show up for us, fight for us, to help stop the spread of COVID, to ensure that we're actually being protected. We even have a huge issue in Florida with the unemployment. The time when we need someone who can vehemently fight for us, he is absent. And really, that's what this election is coming down to. Are you going to elect someone who didn't show up for you? Or are you going to elect someone who can show up for you and fight to make sure that we are represented and we are not left out of, just coming through COVID and prospering and making sure that equality is there, a living wage is there, our schools are better, our children are living a better life, and we're not dying or living based off of money.
Right on. Yeah, well said. So I have a slide up now, just kind of some of your platform issues and things like that. Are there any of these that you want to hit on? Medicare for all we talked about, Green New Deal, free public college, criminal justice reform, women's rights, universal pre-K, ban on fracking, housing as a human right, union rights, living wage. Any of those that you want to expound on?
Yes, one of the things that I really did want to talk about was when we talk about women's rights and how important that is. A lot of times, women's rights are kind of just long, and people just think of it from the healthcare front. But we really have to pay attention to pay inequality that's going on and address that. And as I mentioned, even access to being included at the table when business decisions are being made, and giving us the opportunity to have a career that we choose and be treated as equal. And that kind of falls in line with the necessity for universal pre-K. A lot of people, they hear about the school to prison pipeline, but really don't understand how it develops. A lot of it develops because we have around the second to third grade, children start getting tested. And a lot of those kids who are getting tested, if they fall beneath, that's when we start creating that pipeline, assuming that we should build more prisons because these kids are failing. But what we have seen in studies shown is that with universal pre-K, when the kids are able to join the school system earlier, they actually start having more structure they start being more exposed to structure earlier. They start receiving more information earlier, and it kind of equals the playing field, and it stops that school to prison pipeline, or it helps receive that pipeline. The pipeline needs to end completely, but then we have to make sure that our children are actually giving the right necessities in the beginning, so we're not looking at a ton of developmental issues or labeling them as that, when in fact what it was is the structure wasn't there early on.
Right on. Yeah. And you, as you mentioned at the top, you experienced some of that personally. So, yeah, and you're not alone in that. That's a part of the human condition that we need to address, right? And hopefully, we get some uncorrupted public servants such as yourself to do so. Uh, so again, the website is Sheila for Congress. The election day is August 18th. How can people help?
Oh, well, people can definitely help. We always need donations if possible. And that's on my website. And you can reach me at shieldforcongress.com. We're fighting a huge incumbent who has all the corporations. He's in the pockets of all the corporations. So to get out to the voters, it's even harder right now. With COVID, we can't come out and talk. So we need to phone bank and get people to help us. So donations are great. If anybody wants to volunteer, even with the phone banking, that is wonderful. In Florida, voting has already started through vote by mail. 78,000 people in the district have requested their ballots. And so, the time for us to call and let them know that there is an option, there is an honest option that really speaks to the people is now.
Love it. I love it. Well, yeah, thank you for taking the time to chat with me about your campaign, and hopefully we'll get you across the finish line here in August. Sorry about the technical issues. I can hear you, but there's a black square here. So, but yeah, thanks for running in 2018, and thanks for not being discouraged by that and continuing to run here in 2020. Let's get you on the floor of the House. That would be something.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any final statement or thoughts you want to hit on?
Yes, I wanted to thank you so much for having me. With the work that you're doing by giving us exposure and showing that there is unification and unity in this movement, that speaking for the people is wonderful. And I also wanted to remind everyone that these elections are so imperative, that this is the time where we get to actually define who we are as a country. For so long, we assumed that equality existed, but we knew it didn't. And so now we get a chance to actually fight for us, to put people in office who will fight for us and step away from corporate greed. So I encourage everyone to vote in your district, vote in the primary, whatever state you are, because this is the people's time.
Love it. Thank you. Good luck, and I will talk to you on the other side.
Thank you so much. Have a great